A bright and adventurous 13-year-old student died tragically in the dark depths of Manchester Hole Cave when a sudden flood turned the routine school expedition into a desperate fight for survival. With only minutes of air remaining and freezing water rising rapidly around them, Joseph and his classmates faced a terrifying choice: attempt to swim through a flooded tunnel or face certain death. This is the story of how an ordinary December school trip became a nightmare that would haunt its survivors forever. For the 8th grade students at Tadcaster Grammar School in the United Kingdom, the annual outdoor trip was more than just another school activity. It was the highlight of their entire year, as winter wrapped its cold arms around Yorkshire. Nearly 100 excited teenagers packed their bags for what they thought would be an unforgettable week of adventure at Burley Park Outdoor Education Centre in North Yorkshire. Among these eager students were 3 friends, Joseph, Amy, and Charlie, all standing on the cusp between childhood and adolescence at ages 13 and 4. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The air buzzed with excitement as they arrived at the center, their young minds filled with dreams of the week ahead. The large group of students was efficiently divided into 9 smaller teams, each assigned to different activities, while some groups headed off for hiking along the river or tried their hand at rock climbing and fishing. Joseph's group of 11 students was assigned something more mysterious, exploring the underground cave known as Manchester Hole. Their group consisted of Joseph, Amy, Charlie, 8 other classmates as well, and their math teacher, who served as the adult supervisor. Their guide was a 17-year-old volunteer who had extensive experience with these caves, having traversed them numerous times before. Though young, he was well versed in the cave's layout and safety procedures. From the surface, Manchester Hole seemed deceptively simple, just a small opening in the ground that most people might walk past without a second glance. But this humble entrance concealed one of nature's most impressive architectural feats, a vast underground network of chambers and passages that had been carved by water over countless millennia. Following their guide's careful instructions, the students began lowering themselves one by one into the cave entrance. Each wore a protective helmet equipped with a headlamp and rubber boots to keep their feet dry in the typically damp cave environment. As they descended, the familiar world of daylight gradually faded away, replaced by the beam of their headlamps cutting through the darkness. The initial tight passage quickly opened up into something that left the students speechless, a massive underground chamber that seemed impossible given the tiny entrance they just squeezed through. This first room was truly spectacular, with dimensions rivaling a football field and a ceiling that soared upward of 50 feet. Magnificent stalactites hung from above like natural chandeliers, created drop by drop over thousands of years. The floor of this chamber was covered in a few inches of water, but their rubber boots kept them comfortable as they splashed through the shallow puddles. The initial anxiety that some had felt about entering the cave quickly dissolved into excitement as they explored this hidden underground world. Their headlamps created dancing shadows on the wall as they moved about, their voices echoing in the vast space. After thoroughly exploring the first room, the group proceeded through another tunnel that led them to a second chamber. While not as grand as the first one, this room still provided ample space for students to move around and explore. The ceiling was lower here, and the space was more narrow, but it still comfortably accommodated all 11 students plus their teachers. In this second chamber, they noticed more water on the ground, but their boots continued to serve them well as they sloshed through the muddy bottom. While some of their headlamps had begun to dim, the combined light from the group still provided adequate illumination to see their surroundings clearly. It was what came next that would test their courage, a narrow tunnel that would lead them to the third chamber. This passage was drastically different from anything they'd encountered so far. Standing at its entrance, the students could see it was barely a few feet high and would require them to crawl on hands and knees for over 40 feet. The tunnel wasn't a straight shot either. It twisted left and right, dipped down in some places and rose in others. Rocky formations jutted out in the pathway, requiring careful maneuvering to avoid. A small stream ran along the bottom, and despite their best efforts, everyone got wet and muddy as they crawled through. The limited visibility and confined space made some students nervous, but the promise of another chamber ahead kept them moving forward. When the group finally emerged in the third chamber, something felt immediately wrong. The guide's expression changed as he noticed the unusually high water level. The students were standing knee-deep in freezing water with no dry ground in sight. What made this particularly concerning was that he couldn't remember ever seeing the water this high before. Despite his many previous visits to the cave, the conditions outside had given no warning of potential danger. It was cold and windy, but there had been no rain in the forecast. Yet here they were, standing in knee-deep water that seemed to be steadily rising. The excitement of exploration quickly gave way to unease as the students realized their boots were now completely filled with water, and there was nowhere to move to higher ground. The guide made a quick assessment of the situation and realized that they needed to act fast. The water level was clearly rising, though the source remained a mystery. He made the decision to evacuate immediately, sending the math teacher back through the tunnel first, followed by the students, while he stayed behind to ensure everyone made it through safely. 9 students and the teacher had managed to enter the narrow passage when disaster struck. Without warning, a powerful surge of icy water rushed into the tunnel. The students at the back began screaming in panic, alerting those ahead that something was terrible terribly wrong. Some found themselves kneeling in a foot of water, while others in the lower sections of the tunnel were already chest deep. The situation deteriorated with frightening speed. The teacher, now on the other side of the tunnel, worked frantically to help pull students to safety in the second chamber. The water kept rising, and those still in the tunnel faced an increasingly desperate situation. Charlie, one of the students, realized that they would have to swim through the now flooded sections. Showing remarkable signs of courage, he encouraged his terrified classmates, telling them that it was just a short underwater swim, and then he took a deep breath and went under. In the final chamber, only 3 people remained: Joseph, Amy, and their guide. By now, the water had risen to their shoulders, and their only escape route was rapidly filling up. With very little airspace remaining, they had no choice but to attempt the underwater passage. Their first attempt failed when they encountered other students bunched up in an air pocket, trying to gather courage to swim through. Forced to retreat, Amy and Joseph returned to their starting point with a guide, but the situation had become even more dire. The water was now nearly touching the ceiling. In their final desperate attempt, the guide led them to the flooded tunnel one last time. He managed to bowl Amy through the narrowest part of the tunnel, but Joseph, who was last in line, never made it. When Joseph reached the spot where their last air pocket had been, it was completely submerged. Trapped in the freezing darkness with no air and no way out, the young student's life came to a tragic end. The guide, though desperate to get back and help, was prevented by the teacher from attempting what would have been an impossible rescue. They still had 10 surviving students to lead to safety. What makes this tragedy even more extraordinary is the bizarre chain of events that caused it. On that clear December day, strong gusts of wind had wiped out this Scar House reservoir, causing an unprecedented event. Thousands of gallons of water were blown over the dam, causing the river below to rise by 4 feet in just 1 hour. This water drained directly into the cave system below. While normally such water would trickle through and continue to the groundwater below, the sheer quantity overwhelmed the cave's natural drainage capacity. The result was a flash flood that filled the entire system in just minutes, creating a deadly trap for those inside. When rescue teams arrived 20 minutes after being called, they found the scene had already changed dramatically. The water level had receded to below the knee height, allowing them to access the tunnel leading to the final chamber. There they found Joseph's body, a tragic reminder of how quickly conditions can change underground. The incident led to negligence charges against the county council that operated the outdoor center, specifically for not checking the reservoir's status before allowing the cave expedition. However, they were eventually found not guilty, as the particular circumstances that led to the flood were unprecedented and couldn't have been reasonably foreseen. Joseph's death in Manchester Hole serves as a sobering reminder of nature's unpredictable power and the hidden dangers that can lurk even in seemingly safe environments. The tragedy prompted extensive reviews of safety procedures for school caving trips across the United Kingdom. While the specific circumstances that led to Joseph's death were deemed a tragic coincidence rather than the result of negligence, perhaps the most chilling aspect of this story is how ordinary the day seemed at first. There were no storm clouds, no rain, nothing to suggest that a catastrophe was imminent. Just another school trip that no one expected would end in disaster. Joseph's story lives on as a testament to the importance of respect for nature's power and the need for constant vigilance. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more true stories like this one. Thanks to Afterrender, the premier video production company behind our content. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video.